As of the time of filming this video, Darwyn Cooke has only been deceased for not even a day yet. I'm sure a lot of you are also subscribed to my friend Riley, the Omnibus Collector. We're good friends, and I'm an admin for his Facebook page. I've mentioned that before, and he made a separate video, I suppose, eulogizing Darwyn Cooke as well. And he mentioned me and mentioned how I'm a huge fan of his work. In my bedroom, there's a wall where I have issues that I like to call it my shrine to my favorite creators, and there are issues from my three favorite artists, and those are Frank Quitely, Darwyn Cooke, and Jeff Lemire, respectively. And Riley said, I was feeling kind of sad about it, and he's right. This hits home a lot. First, I just want to talk about why Darwyn Cooke's work means so much. The first thing of his that I've ever read is DC The New Frontier. This is volume 1. I still have the trade paperbacks. I didn't upgrade to the deluxe. I didn't get the absolute, although I was thinking about it because I got an absolute edition of another favorite book of mine, but that's beside the point. I was introduced to his work by a friend of mine. Before that, I heard about Darwyn mostly through iFanboy. They were really good friends with Darwyn. They helped expose his work and stuff like that, and that's where I became aware of his name. And even before that, I remember seeing him do interviews about New Frontier on this ill-fated show called Inked, Alter Egos Exposed, where each episode talked about different things pertaining to comic books, different subjects, and in one episode, I think it was about, tone of comics or something like their subject matter. He talked about New Frontier at length, and it sounded like something that I would enjoy. And then I saw the interviews with him, and it seemed really cool. And then finally, one summer, I was in high school. I think I was about either 17 or 18. I went to Strange Adventures in Halifax for the first time, and a personal friend of mine works there, used to work there, and he was showing off some of Darwyn Cooke's work, and he turned open a page to one of his books, and he said, "Hey, see that?" And he points over at his boss. "Yeah, Darwyn Cooke drew my boss into this book." And that kind of blew my mind. And then he told me how he lives outside of Halifax and he lived in Nova Scotia. It blew my mind because Riley mentioned in his video how I want to make comics someday. I want to write comic books someday. And learning that there's talent in my home province, talent that is well respected and has won many awards, that kind of signaled to me a lot of things. That signaled to me it doesn't matter geographically where you live. You got to understand, I live in an island. I live on an island. I am surrounded by the Atlantic Ocean. I'm in a pretty isolated area. I'm in the what's considered the industrial part of my area. Hearing that this guy who lives in the middle of nowhere in the mainland of Nova Scotia, not only worked for Warner Brothers on one of the greatest cartoons of all time, Batman the Animated Series, and Batman Beyond, he also draws amazing comics that get Eisner Awards constantly and just inspire people to this very day. It will inspire people for generations. That blew my mind. There are kind of 3 books really, that really made me think I can go into comics. The first is the 3rd volume of Sandman, simply because when I flipped to the end of it, Neil Gaiman put in excerpts of his scripts, and that made me realize, shit, I can write it. I can't draw, but I want to write. And looking at the scripts, you know, I was like, shit, I can do that. It's a very simple format. And then the second is Jeff Lemire's Essex County, because I'm from a small town. Jeff Lemire's from a small town. We're both from small Canadian towns. And seeing him put together this graphic novel, these graphic novels, because it was a trilogy, about small farm town Ontario, and people from the States and all over read it and love it and ingest it, it proves to me it doesn't matter where your story is set. It matters. It matters, you know, just how good the story is. Period. And I think the third, to really, not to, the third one being Parker the Hunter, it's not a book that showed me I could do it. It's a book that helped me learn the language of what makes a comic good. And that book, it has one of the greatest intro sequences I've ever seen in a comic. And if you haven't read Parker the Hunter, sorry, fucking do it. Just do it. Go buy a copy right now, then come back and watch this video. After New Frontier, I read Batman Ego and Other Tales. Ego is a graphic novel that he did, I think it was in the late 90s, early 2000s. It was pre New Frontier. And this collection right here also collects a Catwoman story that he did, and as well as a story that he did for Batman Black and White. And just honestly, this is one of my favorite Batman stories, because this just ends the argument it ends the argument of whether Bruce should kill people or not. It just fucking ends it straight up, you know. And whenever anyone says like, oh, Batman should just kill the Joker and shit, I refer to them to this book, you know, as nerdy as that sounds. But I have very vivid memories of my first reading of The New Frontier. I was sitting at my my uncle's campground. He rents, you know, space at a campground in, you know, rural Nova Scotia, and we were sitting there, and at night I'm sitting in his RV and I'm just reading it by like lanterns and shit. And another book of his that I have very, very fond memories of reading is The Spirit, his run on The Spirit. This is volume 1. And this book I read when I was in Veradero, Cuba. You know, not to get all woe is me or anything like that, but I kind of get a little bit of, I guess you can say I have anxiety. There are some times I just got to be away from crowds. I have a fear of crowds. I can't deal with crowds. The only time I can really deal with them is when I'm drunk, whatever. And in Cuba, it hit me quite a bit for the first day or two, and then my brother kind of just like got me out of my shell. And I was just sitting in the hotel for the most part, the hotel room, and I was reading, and I sped through volumes 1 and 2 of The Spirit. And I just, this book is just so weird and so wonderful and special, and it's fantastic, and it really, really shows off just how incredible Darwyn is as an artist. But I think his crowning achievement as a creator, as a cartoonist, is his adaptation of Richard Stark's, pen name for Donald Westlake, Parker novels. The Parker novels were crime novels back in the 1960s that were written by this guy, going under the pen name of Richard Stark, that Darwyn was a huge fan of, and many other crime writers, you know, ever since. And I read the first one. I watched the movie Point Blank because of it, because he said in interviews that was his introduction to the character and stuff like that, and that's like one of my favorite movies now, like straight up. And this book is just fantastic. It's a 10 out of 10 comic, you know. Right here I'm holding this this is the sequel, The Outfit, and the reason why I'm holding this one specifically is because this is a signed copy. I got this for like Christmas one year. My parents, you know, were going up to Halifax and they're like, leave us a list, I know you want books, and they got this at Strange Adventures, and it was a signed copy, and I nearly fucking shit my pants when I saw this, because there's just something about having something with your favorite creator's signature on it, even if you got to meet them or not. There's something about that. It just makes it special, I suppose you can say. And this book in particular, like, The Hunter is a masterclass in art, in comics, but even then, The Outfit does that and then some, because throughout the book, it's about, you know, professional thieves ripping off the mob, and as you see different thieves that get wind of Parker saying, you know, let's fuck over the outfit, the mob, he does it in so many different ways, stylistically. And again, it's another masterclass on how you can adapt a comic, on how you can adapt something, and how you can just frame it into a comic. Like, there's one part of the book where he does it as a true crime pulp magazine or something, and it's like done up in a magazine style. And then there's another part where instead of showing, you know, the heist and crazy, like, you know, he does it like this. He changes up his style so much, and he just does it effortlessly. He is, you know, he's the Stanley Kubrick of comics. You know, he is by far one of the most imaginative cartoonists to ever roam this industry, to ever bless us with such amazing works as this. Darwyn's work, to me, is timeless, and, you know, so many people want to write his work off, and they always say, like, it's nostalgic or some bullshit fucking buzzword like that. It's far from that. Darwyn Cooke was not just someone who drew shit in the 1960s aesthetic. He was more than that. People want to write off his artwork as, you know, nostalgic and stuff like that. They're not really studying what he really did. He did some of the most complex panel layouts and compositions, and the fact that he would do things so subtly, yet they were so complex, and they were so just, oh man, just on the nose every time. I haven't seen a bad looking Darwyn Cooke book. I haven't. That is a fucking fact. My favorite artist is Frank Whiteley. I've seen books that Frank Whiteley has done, namely Jupiter's Legacy, where you can see some, you know, issues. You can see issues with depth perception and shit like that. Whereas Darwyn never had that. Everything Darwyn did, everything he put on the fucking page, he put there for a reason. You know, no matter how much or how little. He used minimalism stronger than most people could with the amount of detail that some people do. Like, it blows my mind whenever I analyze his work, how simple yet complex it is. Straight up. He is one of the greatest cartoonists, if not the greatest cartoonist who has ever fucking come into this industry. He is a modern day Jack Kirby. Will Eisner and Joe Kubert rolled into one. Period. Now, as I mentioned before, you know, I am sad about this. I'm pissed off. I'm sad. And I know a lot of you might be saying, well, you never knew him, you never met him. And I haven't. I never met the man. I never knew him in person. But the fact of the matter remains that his work spoke to me so much that it felt almost like, you know, you have a piece of someone. When you love a creator's output so much and you hear nothing but positive stories about him, and you watch him in interviews and you realize how much of a character he is and how entertaining he is in his own right, those fucking iFanboy interviews that he's done are some of the the funniest fucking things I've ever seen in my life. You know, it makes you feel like you know them, even though you don't. And not only just that, but my heart goes out to his family. As far as I'm aware, he left behind a widow that he married only a few years ago, not too long ago, and I think he has a family as well. You know, to his widow, Marcia, I believe her name is, you know, my condolences to you, to his family and personal friends, my condolences. I empathize a lot with this because this year I lost my grandfather myself, one of my grandfathers. And he was in palliative care himself. He didn't have cancer, surprisingly, because he chain smoked his entire life. But the fact is that I've had a lot of deaths in the family due to cancer. Both of my grandmothers. An uncle, aunts, you know, great aunts, you know, it's scary. I've seen a lot of people die of cancer, and it's something that it's fucking, I wouldn't wish that shit upon my worst enemy. I still have nightmares to this day about my grandmother going through, you know, laying in palliative care, hooked up to oxygen machines to help her breathe because she had so much COPD in her fucking lungs. The sound still haunts me, and probably will for the rest of my days. And you know, not to make this about me, but the point that I'm trying to get to is that I empathize because I've seen this happen. The moment that I woke up yesterday and read it, you know, because it was all over the place. The boys in the omnibus group, the admins, you know, Riley and Mitch and a few of the other boys, Jess, you know, Nick, Cody and Mike, they messaged it in the group, and I was shocked. I was speechless. Especially the fact that they said palliative care. As soon as they said that, I said, he's going. It's just a matter of time. And because again, I've been there and I've seen it firsthand. And yeah. Fuck. The thing that I did as soon as I discovered that, because I had the day off when I discovered that he was in palliative care, I posted on, you know, how sad I was about it and how awful it was. I just sat down, I watched interviews with him. I just absorbed it all. I looked at everything that all these amazing creators that I also look up to were posting about him. Gail Simone wrote a very heartfelt piece about how much she loved New Frontier and how she praised it, and she was one of the few people in the industry at the time who was openly saying, yo, read this book. And Darwyn's reaction to that was one of the classiest things that I've ever heard. Like, he just straight up offered her a comic page. He said, I can give you this drawing of Black Canary that he did, or you could pick an original page, any page you want. That is fucking class right there, you know? Fuck. What I want for you all to take from this video is that we lost a very important person in this medium's history. We lost someone as big as a Kirby, as big as an Eisner, as big as fucking any of them. If you think like, oh, he did superhero comics, what's so revolutionary? Parker, that book series alone is, honestly, I think it's highly influential in terms of the creator-owned market, even though it's based off of a licensed property. It's an adapted property. But the fact that it came out kind of during, pre-Image boom, The Walking Dead was going and it was doing pretty well, but Sex Criminals hadn't launched, Saga hadn't launched, none of that came to fruition yet. And here was this guy saying, fuck this, I'm gonna adapt these crime novels from the 60s that I love, and if it sticks, it sticks. Whenever you watch Darwyn Cooke's interviews, you realize that he was someone who did what he wanted to fucking do, no matter what. Like, in his last interview with iFanboy, he's there talking about how Grant Morrison offered him this second issue of Multiversity, which was the one that was like the pulp age superheroes, and he declined it because he was saying how he was fed up with DC pigeonholing him in the 1960s Silver Agey, Golden Age, kind of aesthetic. And he just said to Grant Morrison, who's my favorite writer, he said to him, like, Grant, I love your writing, but I don't want to do this stuff anymore. I don't want to do the whole Golden Age, Silver Age stuff anymore. I'd love to work with you. Give me something like The Filth or Sea Guy or something, and I'll gladly work with you. But other than that, no thank you. And that says so much about how much of a fucking badass he was. He marched to his own drum and he did what he wanted to do. He never let anyone fucking bend his arm or anything like that. Even when he talks about before Watchmen, he kept saying, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. But he finally did it because he's like, you know what? I actually have a really good idea. Fuck it. Let's do it. And that's something about Darwyn Cooke, is that not only was he a visual genius, he was someone who was uncompromising in his work and in his ethic. And honestly, one of the things that I think is so admirable about him, and I've got nothing but reverence for, is his work ethic. He reminds me a lot of my dad, coming from that old school generation of, do the work, just get it done, and no one in the industry, there's going to be no one in the industry like that, I don't think, ever again. So, this is running along a lot longer than I thought it would, but I just wanted to film this to share my thoughts and offer my condolences to his family and friends. Like they'll ever fucking see this, for Christ's sakes. But to all of us fans out there, when Bowie died, a couple of months back, Simon Pegg, I believe it was, he tweeted this very, very good tweet that helped contextualize all of it and helped help the grieving process. If you're sad about, he essentially said, if you're sad about Bowie being gone, think about in the entire history of Earth, you were alive the time that he was, and he was making his mark. And to us fellow Darwyn Cooke fans, I offer the same advice. We were here to witness the greatness that is Darwyn Cooke and his work. At the end of the day, fuck cancer. Thank you. Be safe. Have a good one.